Welcome to today's Deep Dive. We're diving into some pretty fascinating stuff today. We've got a whole stack of material on Jordan Peterson's philosophy, which touches on some pretty big concepts like commitment, responsibility, individualism, and the whole idea of finding meaning in a world that, let's be honest, often feels kind of chaotic.
It's definitely resonating with a lot of people, probably because it speaks to that inherent desire for order, especially in the face of, well, chaos, like you said.
Let's get right into it then. What about this idea of reestablishing the Garden of Eden? What's Peterson getting at with that? It seems pretty metaphorical to me.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's a powerful image. It draws a parallel between our very human desire for peace and harmony, a world without suffering, and that classic idea of Eden.
Right, but Peterson doesn't seem to think we should just sit around and wait for it, right?
Right, not at all. He's not talking about a passive longing. He's just that achieving this state of, well, meaning and purpose is rooted in the choices we make, the actions we take every single day.
So it's about individual action, not waiting for some external force to create this ideal world.
Exactly. He's very clear about that. Peterson argues that confronting suffering is, well, not only unavoidable, but also transformative.
Interesting. So he sees it as something we can actually grow from.
He does. In 12 Rules for Life, he writes, "You cannot find your way through life without confronting the worst it has to offer. You cannot get through life unscathed, but you can get through it with a deeper understanding of who you are and what you're capable of."
That makes me think of the whole concept of post-traumatic growth. The idea that we can actually come out of really difficult experiences, I don't know, maybe even stronger and with a new sense of purpose.
I think it aligns pretty well, yeah.
Okay.
And this is where Peterson brings in this idea of ethical individualism.
Okay, break that down for me a bit.
So basically, he places the responsibility for one's life and the choices you make squarely on the individual.
So accountability, basically taking ownership.
Precisely. He's saying that through this self-accountability, we don't just create order in our own lives, but we actually contribute to a wider sense of meaning in the world.
So it's not just about self-improvement then. It's about recognizing how our individual choices impact everyone.
Yes, he sees it as interconnected, Peterson envisions this ideal civilization where everyone's cultivating their potential, but they're also adhering to principles of truth, justice, responsibility, and that leads to a flourishing society built on individual integrity.
I see. So it's a kind of bottom-up approach. You're saying a good society starts with good individuals.
That's a good way to put it. It's also connected to his emphasis on ancestral wisdom, when you say.
I was just thinking that it seems like he puts a lot of emphasis on tradition, passed down knowledge. What's he getting at there?
He sees it as more than just facts passed down, It's a kind of spiritual inheritance, a wisdom gained by all those who came before us, who face life's challenges with, I don't know, a certain courage, I guess.
So it's about recognizing that we're part of a larger story, a chain that extends, beyond our own lifespan.
Right, exactly. And through faith, and I think he means faith in something beyond ourselves, we can tap into a sense of purpose that transcends those individual limitations.
So how does suffering fit into all this? We've touched on it a bit, but it seems central to Peterson's thinking.
It is. He writes in 12 Rules for Life, "The antidote to suffering is responsibility, and the capacity for transformation lies in confronting suffering directly."
Wow. Okay, so confronting suffering, taking responsibility, having faith, all these things are intertwined and lead to, well, something greater, something eternal even.
That's the idea, that interconnectedness. He also talks about reflecting the divine image, which is, well, quite a concept.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a challenging idea, but it speaks to, that potential for good, for creativity that we all have within us. And what I appreciate is that Peterson doesn't frame it as a passive thing. It's about actively choosing to align our actions with truth, integrity, responsibility. It's an active choice.
That's a great point. He captures this idea really well in Beyond Order. He says, "The highest aim of a human being is to manifest in their own life the divine image of humanity." It suggests that, that through our choices, we can, I don't know, mirror a higher order, bring some kind of, I guess, divine structure into the world through our own actions.
Okay, but how do we reconcile that with, with the fact that we're finite beings? We have limited time. It seems like a paradox. Reflecting the eternal when we're so temporary.
Yeah, it's one of life's big mysteries, isn't it? But Peterson says something interesting about it. He says, It's not what happens to you that matters, it's how you respond.
So he's shifting the focus to our capacity for growth, for transformation, even in the face of suffering.
Exactly. And he suggests that these moments, the moments where we experience a sense of the eternal, of transcending our limitations, they happen when we act in accordance with our deepest values, our highest ideals.
So it's about making choices that resonate with something bigger than ourselves, contributing to a sense of order and meaning that, well, that extends beyond our own existence, our own limited time.
That's the idea. And it's important to remember, Peterson's ideas didn't develop in a vacuum. There have been a lot of thinkers throughout history who've wrestled with these same questions. Questions about responsibility, meaning the interplay of the finite and the eternal.
It's fascinating to think about all those connections. So who, in your view, offers perspectives that really complement Peterson's? Who should we be reading alongside him?
Well, I think Søren Kierkegaard is a good place to start. He's the Danish philosopher and theologian who's often called, the father of existentialism.
Okay, I'm familiar with his work. He also stressed individual responsibility, right?
Yeah.
And believed that that confronting suffering was crucial for finding meaning.
That's right. He's very much in line with Peterson on those points. And I think his idea of what he called the leap of faith is particularly relevant here.
Right. And that aligns perfectly with what we've been discussing, this idea that, facing life's difficulties with a certain courage, a certain faith, can lead to a deeper connection with the divine, however you define that.
Exactly. There's a great quote by Kierkegaard that sums it up. He says, "The most human thing is to exist in anxiety, but the most divine thing is to live with courage."
I love that. It really gets at the heart of what we've been talking about. Another thinker who explored these themes, though maybe from a bit of a different angle, is Friedrich Nietzsche.
Ah, Nietzsche, the philosopher who famously said, "God is dead."
Right. He's maybe a more controversial figure, but he definitely grappled with these big questions, too.
He did, and while his philosophy might seem, at least on the surface, to clash with Peterson's, there's some interesting points of convergence.
I'm thinking specifically about his focus on the individual's role in creating meaning in a world that, well, that might not have inherent purpose.
Exactly. In books like Thus Spoke Zarathustra, he champions this idea of the Übermensch, which is often translated as the overman.
Right, this figure who transcends conventional morality and suffering to forge their own meaning.
Through sheer willpower, yeah.
It's interesting because even though Nietzsche might not have put it in explicitly religious terms, his call to become who you are really echoes Peterson's emphasis on individuals striving to reach their full potential.
I think that's a great observation. Both are ultimately about recognizing our capacity to shape our own destinies, to overcome limitations, and create something meaningful.
Yeah.
Now, shifting gears a bit, I think we should also touch on Carl Jung. His work on the human psyche and its connection to the divine offers some really fascinating insights.
He's essential reading, I think, for anyone interested in psychology. What aspects of his work do you see as particularly relevant to our discussion today?
Well, his concept of the shadow immediately comes to mind. It really speaks to Peterson's idea that we need to confront our inner demons, our deepest fears and insecurities in order to grow and to achieve a sense of wholeness.
Could you break down the shadow concept a bit for our listeners who might not be familiar with Jung's work?
Sure. So Jung believed that we all have this shadow self, a part of our psyche that contains all the aspects of ourselves that we tend to repress or deny, the negative traits and impulses that we don't want to acknowledge.
That makes sense. We all have those parts of ourselves that we'd rather hide from ourselves and from others.
Right, exactly. And Jung believed that by confronting those parts, by integrating our shadow, we can actually move towards wholeness and connect with a force greater than ourselves, which he called the self.
And that echoes Peterson's idea that, integrating those darker parts of ourselves is part of that path toward meaning.
It absolutely does. And there's another Jung quote that really resonates with what we've been discussing. He said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." It reinforces this idea that self-discovery is not just a psychological journey, but also a moral and spiritual one.
Yeah, I love that quote. And, moving beyond philosophy and psychology, I think we can see these principles, these ideas about individual responsibility and striving for something greater embodied in the lives of figures like Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr.
Absolutely. They are both powerful examples of ethical individualism in action. They both demonstrated that taking personal responsibility, acting in alignment with your moral principles, can lead to to profound social change.
Gandhi, with his philosophy of nonviolent resistance and his unwavering commitment to truth, really showed the world that individuals can choose integrity and compassion, even when they're facing incredible oppression.
Right? He was a true testament to the power of personal conviction. And his famous quote, "You must be the change you wish to see in the world," really encapsulates the essence of Peterson's message. That idea that individual responsibility can lead to collective change.
And Martin Luther King Jr., drawing on his deep Christian faith, also emphasized that individual responsibility in the fight for justice, for equality, his courage in the face of suffering, and his unwavering belief in the power of love to overcome hate, those are incredibly inspiring examples.
Definitely.
To live well is to live in accordance with reason really reinforces the idea that our choices matter, that they have implications not just for our own lives, but for the world around us. It's amazing, really. There's this common thread running through all these diverse thinkers, this shared belief in the power of the individual to confront suffering, embrace responsibility, and truly live by their highest ideals.
And through those individual acts of courage, acts of faith, we can, as Peterson suggests, create a world that reflects a higher order, a world where both individuals and society as a whole can flourish. It really is remarkable, how all these figures spanning centuries and different disciplines, they all kind of land on this similar idea.
Peterson really envisions a society where individuals actively pursue their potential while, embracing that responsibility. And he sees that as the foundation for a flourishing society.
A society where everyone's striving to be their best selves, guided by these principles of truth, justice, compassion.
It's a powerful vision. It definitely resonates with, our hopes for a better world. But how do we make it a reality? Where do we even begin?
Peterson would say it starts with each person taking ownership of their life, their choices, their impact. It's about recognizing that we're not just, products of our circumstances, but active agents, capable of shaping not just our own destinies, but the destiny of humanity as a whole.
So it's about confronting chaos, not with despair, but with, courage, faith, and a commitment to create meaning, to make something from the circumstances we're given.
Yes, it's a journey of self-discovery and transformation. And like we've seen in the lives of those who walked this path before, it can lead to a profound sense of purpose, a deep connection to something bigger than ourselves.
I think ultimately that's what we're all searching for. A life that matters, a life that's full of meaning, of purpose. Peterson makes a pretty bold statement in 12 Rules for Life. He says, the purpose of life is not happiness. The purpose of life is meaning. What are your thoughts on that?
It's definitely thought-provoking. It challenges us to really look at our priorities, what we value. He's suggesting that, pursuing happiness isn't wrong in itself, but it can become pretty shallow, ultimately unfulfilling, if it's not rooted in something deeper, something more lasting.
So meaning comes from confronting challenges, taking responsibility,
Right.
striving to live by those highest ideals. It's not about comfort and ease, but about doing the hard work of creating a life that reflects our values.
Exactly. It's about understanding that fulfillment comes not from seeking pleasure, but from aligning our actions with what we believe is right, what we believe is good.
So we're saying that we find our greatest strength not by avoiding suffering, but by, facing it head on, with courage, with faith. But how do we reconcile that with our very human desire to avoid pain, to seek comfort?
It's a tough balance, for sure. Peterson might say it requires a shift in perspective. The darkest moments in our lives, they often become the catalysts for growth, for transformation. They force us to confront our limitations, to discover this hidden strength and resilience within ourselves.
It's about trusting that even in the chaos, in the uncertainty, there's this underlying order, this pattern that unfolds and invites us to participate.
To have the courage to step into the unknown, embrace the mystery of existence, to trust that even when we can't see the path clearly, we're being guided towards something meaningful, something fulfilling.
So the journey itself becomes the reward. We don't inherit the earth from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children. It's humbling, right? To consider that our individual lives are just this small part of a much bigger story.
It is. And it can be both, daunting and liberating, to contemplate the vastness of everything and our place within it. But maybe that's where faith comes in. Faith in something that goes beyond what we can immediately understand.
Faith that there's this divine spark in each of us, connecting us to the infinite, to the eternal.